we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Dylan Kassane, and I'm on the marketing team here at Inova. First of all, thanks for taking the time to attend our Japan virtual community event today. Today's event is really a chance for us to come together as a community of users to inform you all about what's coming up at Inova in 2021 and to learn some best practices from Inova users just like you. I'm also very happy to be able to welcome 4 speakers to today's event who you'll meet very shortly. Gilles Toulemonde, CEO of Inova, Matthias Hoth, who is the Associate Director of Immunology Partnering at UCB, Florian Wiedenstritt, who's a Project Manager PMO at Merck KGaA, and Janet Halliday, an Associate Vice President, FCT and External Technology at Ferring Pharmaceuticals. Our agenda today is a busy one. We're going to kick off things with Gilles from Inova, who's going to be presenting Inova's vision for the biopharma industry and offering some sneak peeks into some of what is coming up at Inova in 2021. We're then going to jump into a series of 3 fireside chats with our invited guests. We're going to be focused here on using Inova in various ways and in various contexts. I've had a chance to speak to all of our guests ahead of today's event, and I think there's going to be a lot of interest in the ways that they've been able to make Inova part of their daily workflow, spread Inova through their firms, and make the most of Inova while scouting for new technologies, assessing assets for partnering, and even managing alliances as well. Matthias is going to kick things off for us before Florian joins, and we'll round out our discussion with Janet. At the end, we're going to bring all of our guests back for a final Q&A session, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we can. A few logistics just before we get going there with Gilles. Your microphone will be on mute during the presentation so that we can minimize all of the background noise. If you do have any questions during the presentation, please just type them in to the chat window, and we've set aside that time at the end to run through all of those questions and give our speakers a chance to answer them for you. We're going to be recording this event, so if you have a colleague who couldn't make it, or if you want to watch it again later to refresh your memory, we'll send you a link to the recording. And finally, at the end of the event, you'll see a small pop-up survey to complete. If you would take just a minute or so to complete that for us, and that gives us a way of making sure we're providing the content that you need and a chance to let us know if you'd like to participate in a future webinar or online event with Inova as a panelist in the future. Well, that's all of the logistics out of the way. I'm going to get things rolling here with Gilles. So Gilles, I'm going to pass you the ball there. And you can start sharing from your screen. And if you just turn on your webcam as well, we'll be able to see you and it will all be good.
Let me know if it's all good.
We've got the PowerPoint up. We're just missing your webcam at the moment, Gilles.
All set?
Yeah, we're still just missing your camera. It looks good. All right, go for it.
Perfect. Konnichiwa. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm Gilles Toulemonde. I'm the CEO and one of the founder of Inova. It is really an honor to be introducing this virtual community event. And before I get started, I really want to thank our key speakers today, Janet, Matthias, and Florian from Ferring, UCB, and Merck. I think during this pandemic, our industry, the biopharma industry, has really demonstrated to the world that it is an industry that knows better than any others what partnering is about. Developing a vaccine in a year's time was thought to be impossible and made possible by an unprecedented level of collaboration. So I think sharing best practice over partnering like Janet and Matthias and Florian are doing today is part of the sharing culture that I really enjoy in this industry. So thank you again to our 3 presenters. I also want to send out a warm thank you to the Inova team that has put this event together. And last but not least, thank you all for joining this session today. We mentioned that Inova is a community, and bringing you together is a fantastic opportunity. So most of you are Inova users, and my goal today is to give you a perspective on where Inova come from and what we're doing today, but more importantly, what we look after in 2021 and what are our priorities, especially when we think about developing our solutions. So you are users of what we call the Inova Enterprise platform. The Inova Enterprise platform was launched in 2010, and it is today used by a large community of business developers, alliance manager, search and evaluate scouts to manage their biopharma partnership from end to end. And really, this is the core of a business. This is what occupies most of our 90 employees across the different across the globe. In 2016, we launched. Sorry, I just need to figure out. Yeah, there we go. In 2016, we launched another offering that is called the Inova Event offering, and we really launched this in partnership with Bio. And most of you probably know this solution, or I use this solution when you're going to the Bio International Convention. I'll talk a bit more about this later today. But just so you know, to finish on this, we currently, with this platform, on Bio, operate 28 virtual and in-person events. And some of you may have noticed that in 2020, we started to operate or produce our own events, virtual events on oncology, neuroscience, and infectious disease. Long story short, this platform today facilitates 100,000 meetings a year. And recently, we have launched a third offering that is dedicated to data. And it came from a starting point and understanding that pipeline database do not well address your scouting needs. So we developed a data offering to help our large customers spot potential partner. And I will also talk a bit more about this today. I will also explain why those 3 different surfaces are integrated and how they integrated to simplify your daily work. But there is one thing in common to those 3 solutions, is that they're all dedicated to using digital technology to make partnering more efficient. And I'd like to stop there, because I think in the last decade, our industry, your industry, has transformed itself or transformed its innovation model, with over now 70% of new drugs being externally sourced. And it has created a marketplace of assets with intellectual IP right changing hands. But our view is this marketplace still operates in an old-fashioned way, with a lot of transaction advisors serving as intermediaries, meeting taking place in weeks like the week of JP Morgan in expensive hotel suites without any specific organization. And that setup, the way this marketplace operates, not only costs you money, slows down the process and probably delay the time at which a drug could be put on market. But most importantly, our view is that in some cases, some great science does not make it to patients simply because the science is developing this new potential therapeutic or vaccine does not have the right connection. Is to leverage digital technology to make this marketplace more high-tech, to remove most of the friction. And we'll talk more about this, but everything we're doing is really going in to try to make the partnership world more fluid. So going back to what we mentioned, or what we call the enterprise piece of our activity, I'd like to focus there a bit on the community of users. So first of all, the community, you're part of the community of Japan, a pharmaceutical company. We came to Japan in 2015. and we partner with consulting company Innovation Management. And I'm extremely grateful to Shibao-san, who has been our partner ever since. And Pierre-Alain Lemoine-san, Fujigaseki-san, and Kawasaki-san have worked hands in hand to help Shibao-san grow our community of users in Japan, and has been a success. But globally, the Inova community I mentioned earlier, it's 145 organizations. That includes about 60% of the top 50 pharma company, and many smaller organizations or even some very large biotech. But beyond this 145 companies, it is actually 4,000 people or users that use Inova daily. Interestingly, when we look at this 4,000 users, the vast majority today is in business development. We have a significant number sitting in alliance management function, and more we're seeing a growing community among the R&D user community, and I'll get back to that afterwards. So if we were to oversimplify the partnering process between a pre-CDA phase, which we'll call find phase, deal phase, and alignment management phase, what our user distribution means is that the usage of Inova as of today is mainly focused on tracking opportunities from a CDA to a deal, the phase in the middle. Of course, the alliance management professional use it post-deal for post-deal activities, and some, especially the R&D community, use it to manage pre-CDA. So we were intrigued by that. In 2019, we did a survey asking our customers two questions. First of all, for each of those phases, how long do you estimate it takes? It is a very, of course, rough estimate, but that answer distributed on several of our customers start to be meaningful. But most importantly, the question we were interested in was, how would you rate the efficiency of your organization for each of those phases? And we were quite surprised by the answer and found that most of our customers thought they could be much more efficient in pre-CDA activities. And so we decided to dig in, try to understand a bit better, and to see what could be done to address this pre-CDA efficiency. First of all, what we try to understand is, if we improve pre-CDA activities, what is the value for you? And the answer was quite simple, that basically everything you're doing before you go into a confidential discussion and maybe a due diligence is trying to source leads that are the most qualitative as possible. You want the good leads. And we all know that this the biggest challenge in drug development is that it's a highly risky process. And if you take a drug in discovery, only 5% of these drugs will make it to patient. If it's a phase 1, it's in average 11%. So basically, the probability of success is the most challenging aspect. So having good leads could potentially be having leads that have a slightly higher probability of success. So for instance, if you, a large pharma company signing 10 phase 1 license deals a year, that means that with 11%, only one is making it to market. But if you can increase the odds of picking the right one by, let's say, 0.5 points, on those 10 licensing deals, well, if you make a calculation, it will show that it yields $100 million in discounted cash flow. I won't get into the detail of the calculation here, but it's just to share a sense of how important it is to you to source the leads that have the most probability of success. And of course, it's almost impossible or very hard to guess, but there are several ways in what you're doing in pre-CDA's activities do have an influence, after all, on this probability of success. First of all, if you miss an opportunity, of course, you miss potentially something, and you increase, if you lower your probability of success. If you can proactively more easily engage with potential partner, you increase your chances of being perceived as a partner of trust. If internally you engage with your scientists more efficiently, you will have more collaborative work, you will have more informed decisions. Long story short, my point here is that pre-CDA's activity, we're only talking about non-confidential discussion and can seem not that important, but after all, this is what you bring to your funnel of due diligence and confidential discussion, and that has the greatest influence on the quality of the deals you will be making down forward. So that in mind has been our driver for our roadmap as a company over the past couple of years. And what we have in mind is really to help your organization to empower the search for partner. Try to leverage your researchers so they can help in your search. And so that's what we call from research to search, but basically it comes down to this idea of trying to find ways in new technologies, to increase pre-CDA or the efficiency of pre-CDA's activity. Launched, actually, as I say, launched, it was on December 1st, a new module called the Lead Space. And it is a new tool specifically designed for pre-CDA's activity. And follow up on leads and create corporate memory. And you might think it's very similar to what Inova does today, but it is designed to be more collaborative, to address a larger community than community of internal contributor that can help you take the most possible informed decision. And as you will see going forward, that lead space will grow over time and it will integrate the two other novelty I want to talk about are data and virtual event solutions. So let me now get to our virtual event, So our virtual event was launched first in 2020, and we started with 4 events, one on COVID-19, one on oncology, one on neuroscience, and one on infectious disease. What a virtual partnering event is simply the same thing as what you're used to when you go to a partnering conference, except that the meeting do not take place physically, they take place online using a video conferencing system. In our case, it's Global Meet. We have, as I mentioned, launched such service in 2020 and will continue in 2021. So the agenda is not yet released, but it will still soon be released, so stay tuned for it. And we will continue with the idea of having therapeutic area focused virtual partnering conferences, one on oncology, one on neuroscience, one on rare disease, and one on infectious disease. The last thing I want to talk about is what we're doing in the area of data. We have launched last year a service called Partnering Intelligence, and we are actually investing a significant amount of resources to scale this service and to increase the quantity and, more importantly, the quality of the data we can offer. I mentioned briefly in the introduction that what we're trying to address here is the search and evaluate needs that are not totally or properly covered or addressed by pipeline databases. What I mean by pipeline databases are databases like Clarivet Cortellis or Global Data that are really designed more for competitive intelligence purposes. And because they are designed for competitive intelligence purposes, they don't address some very important information. First of all, it is really hard in those databases to distinguish assets that are partnerable from the ones that are not partnerable. And that's actually the information you want to have when you look at 100, 200, 3,000 assets. You want to rapidly filter the ones that where you could be having a discussion with a biotech from the ones that are already on the market. And that can be cumbersome, and you end up with too many assets to filter and too many information. Secondly, those pipeline databases are often missing some early stage assets, mostly because their data are being tracked manually, and it's not very easy to track the emerging technology. So what we have done is we're putting a data offering that starts from data we capture at the conferences we covered. So I mentioned we covered 28 partnering conferences, including the Bio International Convention. And that provides every year 4,000 data updates or creations, over 8,000 biotech company and about 20,000 assets. So when a company is coming to one of those partnering conferences, as you have attended probably many, you know very well, they will have to enter their company profile with some information about the management, their scientific board, and also some asset information about what they're working on. But you very well know also that sometimes those information can be biased, or at the minimum, they can be really poor in terms of description and scientific background about the asset they're working on. And that's where we're investing a lot of energy and resources, developing some manual curation process, but most importantly, some AI-driven technology that can enrich this information with, for instance, scientific information or clinical trial information, or more importantly, information on people, management, and different fund raised. So once that information is enriched, it's being tagged with several ontology, and I won't get into the details here. The way this is being packaged and offered as of today is through a service called Partnering Intelligence. So the service simply operates in a very straightforward way. First of all, you express what type of scouting needs you would have, and we have analysts who will be talking to you and discussing with you to make sure we understand. Those same analysts will run the query on the database and provide a list of leads. That's the temporary manner to deliver the service. In 2021, by the end of the year, those data will be integrated into the lead space for direct access. That's about the three things I wanted to share with you today about what we plan to do to continue to help you more efficient in your pre-CDA's activity, meaning by that the phase during which you search and rapidly triage the leads that you want to move to confidential discussion or not. I'm done for today. Thank you again for everyone, and I'm looking forward to listen to the other presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Gilles. Gilles, just before you go away, we've got a couple of questions, and as we've got a couple of minutes, would you mind taking a couple of questions now?
Absolutely.
The first question is about the lead space, and it's just, is lead space available in Q1 2021?
Absolutely. It was released in Q4 2020. So as I mentioned earlier, it was released on December 1st. So it is available.
Okay. The second question is, when will the virtual partnering event schedule be announced?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's a week or two from now. What they have in mind is probably two events in March and 2 events in October.
Okay. And the third question is Partnering Intelligence available now or only in 2021?
partnering intelligence is available now as a service, and we have already offered this as a service to several of our customers. The data will be accessible directly from the tool LeadSpace by the end of 2021. Sorry if I brought confusion there, but you can already purchase a service from Inova to scout on your behalf and query our database.
Perfect. They were the questions that we had for Gilles. So thank you, Gilles, for this morning. I'll get you to turn your webcam off now, and I'll invite Matthias to join us. We're a little bit ahead, but I think that's going to be okay. Matthias, if you can just turn on your webcam, we should be good there. I say good morning to you. We can see you just fine. Oops, just gone forward there. We can see you just fine. Welcome. It's morning for you. It's afternoon for most of the people on the call here in Japan. How are you doing this morning?
I'm fine. Yeah, it's earlier than I usually start, 7:30 here, but I'm still doing fine. So thank you very much for having me on the panel. It's a pleasure.
No, this is great. Matthias, you're from UCB, but I wanted to give you just a chance here to introduce yourself. Why don't you start by telling everybody a little bit more about your position at UCB and what you do there?
Okay, so a little bit background on myself. So I'm a scientist by training. I have a PhD from University of Munich. Done a couple of postdocs in the UK and in Switzerland. Then worked for a biotech company, leading their protein biochemistry lab, and then finally joined UCB, which is almost to the day 14 years ago, and have been there in a number of sort of outward-facing roles, and finally now working in the immunology TA as an immunology partnering lead. What this function does, so there's as in every slightly bigger company, there are a number of sort of partnering related functions at UCB. So where I am sitting is it's a partnering function that's embedded in the R&D organization. So we are subject matter specialists who sit in the R&D department in the immunology TA in that case, and look for suitable opportunities, a scouting evaluation, and for that function, in my case, that's immunology and musculoskeletal diseases.
And you've been using Inova yourself at UCB for quite some time now, haven't you?
Yeah, I think we joined at the very beginning. I think it's 2010 that we started using Inova.
And really what I'd like to talk about today is how Inova has spread at UCB, because the users today are not the same users that you had 10 years ago. Tell me a little bit about how UCB has grown with Inova and how the software is spread through the organization there.
Yeah, so I mean, it started just being a BD tool. So I think in 2010 we were looking for replacement what we had in place back then, and found Inova, and it was used exclusively by a relatively small number of people just around the partnering, so global BD and some of our partnering functions like myself, and that went on for quite some time. And I think it was only a few years ago that we felt we wanted to bring in more teams. You had discussions between related teams, for example, alliance management, global BD, our partnering teams, and others, where you always said, but where is that all stored? And we said, well, we have a database, but you haven't got access to it, right? So there was a drive to basically spread this a bit wider, to have like a common system where you can look up things, where you can track things. And I think the first team, in addition to BD and partnering, that came on board was alliance management, with this alignment module that is in Inova. But very recently, we brought in quite a number of other sort of related teams into the mix as well.
What was everybody using before they switched over to Inova?
Hard to tell, which again is, I think, part of the answer of that. So everybody was using their own little bespoke method. I mean, and that ranges from Excel spreadsheets to having only an email trail on everything. So it's quite mixed and varied and wonderful there, but nothing sort of like consolidated.
And today, I guess each of these teams have found their own value by using Inova, but is there a global value there too, something that's a little bit bigger than just the sum of all of the parts?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. So everybody has now a solution for their individual problems. Like, for example, for us, we want to store things and track things and so forth, and so on and so forth. But I mean, for the company as a whole, I think the big upside is that you build basically a corporate memory of your partnering activities, right? So basically you have a sort of like a body of data which shows what you're doing at what stage it is, and everybody in a way who can access it and find out what's going on. And there's an immense value about this. So you have a common language, you have a common place that you can go, and it's I think it's really useful and very valuable.
I guess one of the things when you introduce any new software to a company or to a part of a company, it can be a little bit tricky sometimes. And there are always some, I guess I talk about push and pull factors. The push that we've got to get people to use it, but also the attraction of a new tool with some new functionality. Can we talk about a couple of those? What actually pushed UCB or some of those teams into making a choice? Did Excel just not cut it anymore?
Yeah, I mean, Excel can do everything, as we all know. It's just not always the best tool for that. Yeah, it's so I think for us, when it all started, Inova back then sort of was unparalleled in sort of the ease of use of those systems. That got the partnering and the BD community on board there. What we had before there was sort of relatively clunky, old-fashioned sort of database type approaches and solutions. We also had an in-house one, which then wasn't really sort of kept up to date. So it was just something which sort of like breathed sort of like fresh air into the whole system. So that was how we got on. The more recent expansion, I think, was mainly driven around this realization. So hang on, we all work on the same thing. For example, with alliance management, just a bit further down the line or a bit earlier. Why do we have it in solution X and you have it there, and it seems to work well? So I think having a common working tool also was incredibly empowering. I think that was probably the main selling point for the latest expansion, also into finance and into legal, where so everything is basically around the partnering space. They like the idea and still appreciate the idea that basically we all feed into the same pool there and also draw from it.
Yeah, and so you're mentioning teams that are not necessarily involved in the strict search and evaluation or the business development, but that's finance and legal. They're all using the tool as well. Yeah,
obviously related to the partner activities, right? So there's always sort of like associated teams who work with that. So it's not that legal now entirely works in finance. That wouldn't make sense. But yes, so around the sort of like wider partnering space where we look for things, we bring things in, we discuss things, and to have a collaboration alliance type thing. All of those activity and associated like finance and legal are basically on board with our system.
You know, I always think it's really difficult to bring about a change in an organization, and the bigger the organization like UCB, the harder that change is going to be to bring through, even if it's really necessary. For people who are attending the event today who are in a similar sort of position to UCB, even just a couple of years ago, what would be some practical ways that they might drive the spread of a tool like this inside the company? I think when we spoke before, you mentioned the importance of having a champion or a sponsor.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about sort of change. Change is hard, and you always need a little bit of alignment of stars, right? So there's things that are beyond your control, so you can only try your best. What helped in our case to bring it from this partnering only to sort of like a slightly wider accepted solution was that there was always the push from our side, so working the tool to make it better and to bring more people on there. But there was a time where sort of the executive people got annoyed by the fact that they had no visibility of the parting process. The story goes it was triggered by an event from our head of R&D who just spoke to people, said, oh yeah, we already have a conversation with you ongoing, and he had no idea about it, nor had he a way of looking it up, what's going on there. So he said, this needs to be a bit more centralized. And I think there was a drive then for about 2 years from the top, where we say, can we simplify, can we align, and can we sort of harmonize our scouting approaches? And that was sort of like a big driver, together with basically the push from our side, from the bottom. So it was a combined bottom up and top down, which made this happen, because all of a sudden you had some alignment, because said, yes, we want to fix this, and you had basically also the executive support.
It's really important to have that executive support, but you also talked about the time frame for that to actually happen. It's not an overnight process, is it?
No, I think from when we started this latest, say, refreshment, how we're going to call that, where we brought more teams on and actually also redesigned the interface together with you on our sort of partnering solution, I'd say it's about 18 months. Until this was all complete. It does take time, because the beauty is, if you involve more teams, you have more voices, but of course if you have more voices, you have also more time and more discussions and longer decision processes.
Was it hard to make the business case internally? Or is that something you had to put some time into there?
I think because we had this sort of alignment that basically people in top said, we need to fix this, we don't know anything what's going on, and we had the push from below. We said, actually, we want to work better together. It was actually it was fine, I think, but that's what's needed, because there's always, of course, always budgets involved. There's always forcing people out of their ways into new ways, and all that takes a little bit of sort of power and oomph as well. So I think from the top, constant applied pressure also helps a lot to make things move in those timelines, right? You can't try it from below, it's much harder.
Yeah, and I guess the budget is one important part there, but there's also the IT element there, and convincing IT that this is the latest solution and that everybody needs to move. That takes some work as well. How early do you bring IT in, and how do you convince them that this is the change to make?
Yeah, first of all, it's probably as early as possible, as early as you have a business case, a business need at least, because then they can sort of like, they don't get surprised, right? They don't like to get surprised, IT organization, and they have a sort of line of sight. They can so basically evaluate it with other solutions they know. I mean, the problem with them is that everybody comes to them daily with a new solution. Say, can we have that? And they say, well, we tried already 25 of those. Why do you want this one? So I think there's a education process. There's a process telling them you're serious about this by having a good business case and having also differentiated business case. We say, but this can do this, all the others can't. So I think bring them in early, be serious with them. So don't make them feel that you play around with them. It's just like the 15th solution that you're trying out today. And I think then they can be important allies, because in the end, they make it work and make it stick together.
When we talked about that business case before, you said one of the important things was time, the time that you were going to be able to save. Have you found that was something that you highlighted going in the business case? Is that something you found day to day, that you're saving yourself time with Inova? Yes, we did that. It's of course always a hard case, because then everybody wants numbers, how much time, and then you basically say, well, I don't know, but it must save time because it's so much more efficient, right? So I think it's always on there. So I think I usually try to sell it on efficiency, and efficiency always automatically means that there will be some time saving, because if you're quicker and better at doing something, you have to save time in a way. It's often easier and more intuitive than the actual, well, how much time do you really save? And so that's probably what we employed in our business case. So enhance, and so yeah, sometimes dramatically enhance the efficiency throughout your process. And I guess that there's a reduction in friction there as well internally, if everybody is using this tool and can see what's happening at any point in time.
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of it. So as you get more teams on board, I mean, the first one, alliance management, was almost like a automatic. So yeah, it's amazing because they already have early sight of what might be coming towards them. So that was a good one. But every other team that you added, all of a sudden, again, you say, well, just look it up, it's there, right? Or I just share that link, so it increases the smoothness of operation quite dramatically, and that's a nice thing about it. And also, as I said before, you learn to speak in a common language, right? You have to Inova is the one, it's there, or how you call it, this is our licensing project. You look up in that module, it's in the document, so people know where to find it as well. You don't have to describe it, you have to point, you don't have to explain your data, because people are familiar with how it is presented and how it is stored in Inova.
Let's just pivot back to something you mentioned before, but I think it moves on from there. You mentioned corporate memory before, and having that corporate memory. And I guess if everybody's on the same path and everybody's on the same software, you all have access to that same corporate memory. How important is it at UCB to actually have that one single source of truth there for a memory?
I think it can't be overrated. I mean, partnering is such a sort of cyclical operation. I mean, things you look at in 2014, you get back in 2018, and some things you look at twice a year at all the partnering meetings. And so basically having the continuity in the system, whether people are staying or leaving, right? There's always a certain turnover in your partnering teams. I think it's highly important that you can still say, oh yeah, but we met in 2014. That was a decision. Okay, let's see where they can move on the discussion. Without that, it's basically either you're a really, really well-connected individual in the company, and then you may get part of that back. But again, with the turnover and new teams being brought into the system, it's almost impossible to have that. So having a central tool where this is all there for you to read and to discover is immensely useful.
And when you say all there, that's everything, right? You've got the contacts, the discussions, the emails, right through contracting as well.
Yeah, so so contracts for us are not stored because there's a legal requirement, so they are not in there. But so everything along the way, including the CDAs and some agreements and these kind of things, will be stored in there. You will have an email trail. If you push your emails into the system, you will have all the documents. You will have the historic decisions. How you decided in 15 and 16 and 19. And all of that is there, and I think that is particularly also when you have emails in there. I think they're very, very useful to look through the history of engagement with a
company. Maybe if we can round things out now, Matthias, there are people listening who may be using Inova in just one part of the business or in just one part of the partnering process, who are thinking about spreading it through the organization or hoping they could spread it through. Could you maybe give what are the most important things that they should be taking to their C-level, to their VPs, to say that this is something that we have to do, and here's the reason why? What should their main points be?
Yeah. So again, I think the corporate memory is a massive one. You basically you put your partnering, your whole external outreach on sort of like a solid foundation where you can basically for years to come you just have it in there and accessible at any level, right? So that's the big number one. The second one is the big efficiency gain of all the teams that work around partnering cases. So they don't have to pull out their individual solutions, their individual things. You don't have to explain data. You basically, you live in the same system. So the incredible increase in efficiency. And I think it's those two things. So the lack of friction, the information, all the information you need in being in one place. You can train new people, onboard them onto the system, onto the tool, and it's immensely important. So I think those are the two major points I would say are building a business case for Inova to expand it throughout your business.
That's fantastic. Matthias, we're going to bring you back for the Q&A in just a bit, but I'm going to ask our next panelist to jump in right now. So thanks for your time. I'll get you just to switch your webcam off, and I'll invite Florian to jump in, and we'll see you very soon.
Okay, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And Florian, welcome. It's morning for you as well, right?
Yeah, that's true. Good morning,
very,
Dylan, and good afternoon for the Japanese.
This is good. So I appreciate you waking up early. You're from Merck KGaA. Why don't you just take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself there and tell us what you're doing there right now?
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. That's true. I'm part of Merck KGaA. We at Merck, we have three different sectors. One is our healthcare sector, one is our life science sector, and I'm actually part of the performance material sector, where we develop new materials for the electronic industry. Me, myself, I joined the company 3.5 years ago, straight from university, and I have a bachelor degree in chemistry. So as a scientist, my master's is business chemistry. I had a year chemistry and a year business administration to see a bit of the business side. And yeah, since 2017, as I said, I'm a part of Merck. I started as a business analyst for doing some M&A landscaping and switched over to technology scouting. And now I'm part of our newly created Chief Technology Office.
What I find really interesting about your journey with Inova is it essentially started the very first day that you were there at Merck, right?
Yeah.
Your first role at Merck was entirely Inova centric. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was hired as an intern to implement the database within Performance Materials. So, and why we chose Inova and why us as a chemical business or material business of Merck chose pharma-based databases that our healthcare business, healthcare sector, they used Inova, and we didn't want to create a new software, a new tool, so we used what was existing and hopped on, and yeah, the decision was made before I started. So I guess there was no one really wanting to implement it, to take it over. So they hired an intern, in this case me, and yeah, my task then was to introduce it to the Performance Materials business. At that time, we had our team was called Alliance Management, but we were doing yeah, technology scouting and M&A landscaping, and so we were trying to find new leads and new assets in.
Let's talk about the process then that you went through, introducing Inova to the team and rolling it out there. I believe you said to me that your team was very international at that point.
Yeah, so we had so actually how we work now. Most of us from home office, half of our team was doing that. My manager, he was based in Israel. We had a colleague in UK. We had two colleagues on the West Coast, and yeah, a couple of us in Darmstadt. And along the time, half a year or a year later, the team also extended. So we had a colleague in Japan, one in Taiwan, one in China. So it was a very international team, which created some challenges in the beginning to onboard everyone and to roll it out. But luckily, we had the chance to meet once a quarter in person, and so I had the chance to do some hands-on workshops and show the users how it really works and how it creates value for them.
Yeah. And I guess those hands-on workshop in person are really valuable. But if this team was remote, how did you practically go about onboarding people to this new tool?
Like we have now, we had video calls, we had conference calls, and it's a bit of a challenge. In the beginning, it was a bit easier since we had just 3 time zones, and the time difference was just 10 hours from Israel to the West Coast. But then with the Asian colleagues, it was a bit more difficult. But I guess most of the people know nowadays. But yeah, we had virtual calls. I was yeah, obviously sharing my screen and then guiding them through the tools. What I did is I before I try to convince them about Inova, I actually listen to them and figure out how they do the technology scouting. Because for me, since I just came from university, for me it was also new technology scouting. I needed to learn how my colleagues do their job, and then create the workflow according to what they do on a daily basis, and not vice versa. Don't create a workflow within the tool and then force them to use it, but doing it the opposite way. And yeah, and then I selected some examples, like having a university and found a professor who's working on an interesting technology which we are interested in, and then guide them through what do I do. I found this lead. I create an organization, from that an opportunity, and so I walk them through the entire process.
So I guess in the end, the choice of the software and the rolling out of the software is one thing, but looking back in hindsight, that's almost the easy part. I mean, the real key is making sure that these professionals you were working with, who'd had their own ways for so long, actually use the software. You know, one of the things you mentioned to me before when we were preparing for this event was the importance of actually bringing in all of that old data, everything that was sitting in Excel files, everything that was sitting everywhere else. Tell me about that. Why was that important?
Some of the users said, if I don't have my old data in there, so if I don't have my history in there, which I'm still using to work on a daily basis, I'm not going to use a new tool. So they don't want to switch between their old Excel spreadsheets or the folder structure and the new database at the same time. So they wanted to use one solution, and this way we had the chance to fill the database, to show them what the database is capable of. Because if you have a blank database there, no one really understands what value it can give. So yeah, importing the old databases and data was very variable. First of convincing the people to use it, but then also to show them value of it. And this is what so we in Performance Materials were the second sector within in Merck to use it. But we had afterwards our innovation center, our strategy and transformation group. They started using it, and they took this best practice and also imported stuff. They are onboarding our China Innovation Hub now. They import historic data, because then the users have their own information, their own stuff in there, and they identify themselves a bit more with the database than having a blank one.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be encouraging if you can show how it can import everything that's already there, and you don't have to change your ways too much. But then I guess the other side of that was the reporting, and I guess you told me your boss had a saying about the work that didn't make it into the report, and sort of a pushing people along there. What was that about?
It was about, it is, as Matthias also said, that it's sometimes challenging that the people really want to use the database and see the value in it. And you also mentioned that it's a bit of a push and a pull, and yeah, in this case, our manager said that so he asked, Inova has a tool to push monthly reports out, and our manager said that everything which is not in this report you haven't done and you can't get credit for. So this report helped us to shorten or replace our current the monthly reports, which we needed to do manually, and in this way we had the chance to just get automatically updates from the database, so that he can get it. And yeah, we saved time in not doing our reports, but he didn't need to convince us to use it, because he demanded it.
Well, and that's got to help if the boss is pushing you along in that way. That's got to help with adoption. But what about adapting workflows as well? I mean, you said you were brand new to the team, and you were coming into a group of professionals who had been pretty set in their ways. You know, how did you adapt the workflows? Was that an easy process for you?
Yeah, so to be honest, since I've learned first from them how they did the scouting, there was not, so we created this workflow according to the work as a daily task, as I said before. But in the beginning, I didn't do tech scouting at all, so I had no clue. After, what was it, 1.5 years, I also started to do tech scouting myself, and I learned that it is much more valuable. So I knew what I would need from the database, and then at that time it was much easier to understand why my colleagues asked for certain features or for certain points before. So it is of value if the person who runs the database or who manages the database has clue about the process and has clue about what technology scouting or alliance management or how it really works.
So maybe if we can summarize in terms of getting the team on board, you've got on the one side the manager saying if it's not in the report, it didn't happen. So so that's pushing people along. But are there benefits that the team started to see from using Inova and using Inova instead of different methods to support their tech scouting?
Sure, that as Matthias mentioned, efficiency was some point. You didn't have to. We send out standardized reviews to our opportunities, so that we got all the response in one tool as corporate memory, and we didn't need to dig through all the emails and find all the responses. That was a big help. Knowing which companies you've already screened and which companies have been already screened within the within our organization was helpful, because sometimes startups can be persistent, so they go to one person, and then if they don't succeed, they go to the next person, and then they go to the next person. Sometimes because they don't know what the organization structure of the organization is, because big company is also messy, but also sometimes because they hope to find some kind of person, some person who gives them credit and lets them in. So this way we had the chance to go back to the database and see, have we already evaluated it? When did we do that? What was the result? And have the assumptions been changed so that the re-evaluation makes sense?
And I think those are all strong things. And Matthias talked a little bit about some of the importance of the corporate memory and the efficiency there. But it's interesting to see that it's not just in partnering; it's also in the tech scouting. It's right across the organization as well. Let's pull back a little bit here. There are people on the call today who might want to spread Inova a little bit further through their company. They're using the software, their team uses the software, but they want to spread it there or onboard new users like you had to do in your case at Merck. What sort of advice would you have for those people who want to expand the use of the tool a little bit in their organization?
One of the points is that sharing the information or transparency of those information across different sectors can be very helpful. We have, for example, we have a life science sector which is highly driven by our previous acquisition, Millipore and Sigma Aldrich. Sigma Aldrich has a material science group which is doing also scouting, so they try to populate the legacy Sigma Aldrich catalog, and so they do scouting for materials. We do scouting for materials. Some things which from our point of view are too small might be interesting for the material science business of our life science business. So having this exchange, also I mentioned to you earlier, M Ventures, our venture fund, they scout for startups. They scout for startups on a point like to invest, to collaborate, to partner with. So sharing this information and having a transparent database so that people from different sectors who might need those information can have access is very helpful and creates a lot of benefit. 2 days ago, I got a request again from someone who said, "Your team, 1.5 years, had a workshop with a professor in UK. I don't know the name anymore. I don't know exactly the topic, but it was useful for us. I believe it was University of Liverpool. Who was it? And then so the colleague who did that left already the company, so I could go into the database, help a bit, and yeah, after a few seconds, I could find the resource and the slide deck, and I could forward it, and it was of help. So new collaboration or new partnership might create of it. Where at that time, 1.5 years, there was no one who followed up, but now we found something, and this is super valuable.
One of the things you also mentioned to me when we were pulling things together was the importance of having someone full time to drive that rollout and to be the someone who's driving the adoption and the engagement within the organization. You still think that's important?
Yeah. So I see that in the beginning it was at least 50% of my task to implement this database, and as long as changing the jobs now, I had less and less time for fewer and fewer time for this, and I see from other sectors that implementation was very slow. But as soon as they hired someone who was at least 50% in charge of managing the database or the implementation, it accelerated quite a bit. So one FTE is ideal, but I think 50% is, from my experience, was helpful to have.
Yeah, and I guess having someone there full time to drive things, or at least 50% full time to drive things along, is important. But surely you didn't do it by yourself. You had some support from Inova along the way as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. Especially in the beginning, I was lucky to have, I guess, the most experienced colleagues in Inova to support me, and customer success manager, and but also from the business perspective, that was very helpful, because for me the database was completely new. Corporate business was completely new for me, and they helped me a lot. Also, I mentioned that our team got extended, and I made a in-person onboarding session for what was it, 1.5 2 hours. I had Jill, our customer success manager, dialing in, so whenever I got stuck, she could jump in, and so that was very helpful. Yeah.
And I guess finally, the last thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned just in passing there, was that the venture arm of Merck is someone who might be interested in having a look at the database and having a look at the information that you have there. Has it become that sort of resource at Merck where different teams will plug in and gather information and share that information with other teams? Is it that sort of resource?
Yeah. So the venture team has a separate tool for themselves, because we always talk about that the financial information from the startups are not to be shared with the rest of the company, but the other way around, that whenever the businesses find, so there needs also be, for our venture fund, there's always be a link to the business units or the sectors, and there also always needs to be a sponsor within that sector to have a investment. So all these databases where especially Inova, where the sectors find already interesting candidates while they scout, it's our ventures fund is interested, and they go also, if they find a new startup, they go into the database, search if we have already done something with them, if there's already a slide deck available. Maybe we still have a CDA which is running and no one has followed up. And this is a resource our venture fund is using to validate their startups they find, or find new ones.
Fantastic. There's always another use case. It's just one of those tools that can grow like that. Florian, I'm going to ask you to switch off your webcam now. I'm going to invite Janet to join us. So Janet, if you can switch on your webcam there. Good morning. No, we can't hear you there, Janet.
Good morning.
Good morning, and of course you're already well known to our community here. You were a guest on our tech scouting webinar last year, and thank you for getting up earlier in the UK, even an hour earlier than here in France. And so welcome to our event. Janet, you're at Ferring Pharmaceuticals. What's your role there?
Good morning, Dylan and Konnichiwa to our Japanese colleagues. My role in Ferring is twofold. I manage a CMC team of 30 people in our facility in Scotland, hence the accent. I'm also, the other part of my job is looking for new drug delivery technologies. So technologies that the organisation would like to evaluate as potential platforms to use to develop new products in reproductive medicine, maternal health, urology and gastroenterology.
And you've been using Inova since about 2016 on your team.
That's correct, Dylan. We had kicked off a project to organise ourselves better in technology scouting, and as had been mentioned by, I think, both our previous speakers, there were individual bespoke systems within the organisation where somebody had a Excel spreadsheet and somebody else had a SharePoint site and somebody else had an old access database that people were using. And like was mentioned previously, somebody left the organisation and all of a sudden we couldn't find certain linkages, or we would phone up a technology expert and they say, oh, but we've been speaking to so-and-so in Ferring already. Very unprofessional and very inefficient.
And what does it mean to actually use Inova on your team then? What's a day-to-day use case? So
we would have the first access point. We built our process around, built the process in Inova around the process that we developed. So first of all, we came up with our own process, and then we worked with the Inova team to incorporate it into the platform. So we, first of all, in a scouting sense, we'll look at a technology and we'll evaluate it. We'll look at it if it's, does it fit with our strategy, the health technology areas I talked about. Do we think that there's scientific rationale? I mean, does it, to us as scientists, make sense? And thirdly, in the first round of scouting, we will say, do we even think this has a possibility of being a commercializable process, a GMP type process? There's lots of clever technologies that people can make in small scale in the lab, but then the thought of moving that to a larger scale, if it's something that seems, you know, totally untenable, then we'll mark it down in that evaluation.
And I guess for a really practical example, can you think of a time in the last week or so where you've logged into Inova just to do something and add to this process?
Dylan, I'm in Inova every single day, so I'm looking at technologies at different stages. So if, for example, last week, if I had just been to one of the partnering conferences, meetings, yeah, we all have to do this online virtual meetings now. So I would perhaps meet half a dozen people with potentially interesting technologies, and they would go in as a first stage in my scouting. Then I would be following up on those contacts. We have developed a standardized form for requests for further information, non-confidential at this stage, just an overview, so that we can fairly compare technologies one to the other. And then so that would be moving from the, not for us, but to something this might be interesting, into the pre-assessment stage. And then I might be working with somebody during the technology evaluation when we have now moved into a more confidential discussion and something that's a bit more real. And I would be starting to bring in our subject matter experts across the pharmaceutical development team look at that technology. And then the final stage would be the actual feasibility work. So I would have a phone call. I have one end of next week with a technology. We've been working with those people now for 3 years, and we're getting to the end of the wet technology work, looking at actual drug release in the lab. So I could be looking at all of those things in a single week across the Inova platform.
So yourself, you're using the platform very regularly, like you say. Do you have to ride your team hard to use the platform, or do they find that it's just a part of their everyday work?
It's a mixture. It's people. So some people are very comfortable with the technology and will pop in and out regularly. I have monthly team meetings, follow-up meetings on the technologies where things that are particularly of interest that we're working on, different people are following up. And I find that monthly meeting stimulates people to pop into the system, to update their activities, to log in any new documentation that's coming. And that acts as a reminder to people to use the system.
One of the interesting things that we talked about when we were preparing for this event, you explained that you have a core team of about 12 people on the tech scouting, but then there's another 174 people at Ferring which have read access to Inova. Who are these other people, and why would you give them access to Inova like that?
So the people that I have access are general scientists, people who work in pharmaceutical drug development, who have expertise in their own areas, but are not working in a outreach role. So they may come across a scientific paper and think, that's quite interesting. Wonder if we've had a look at that. Or they might see an article in a conference. They might stumble into a particular presentation and think this is of interest. And so they can go into the platform, they can type in the technology name or the company name and say, oh, we're already speaking to this person. Oh, and it's Janet in FCT that's the contact person, and then they can either decide not to follow up with me, or they can follow up with me and find out where things are in the relationship. Alternatively, they can see, oh, we've not spoken to this people, and in each location we now have one of these 12 subject matter experts who one of these random scouts, you might call them, can then get in touch with that person directly, or they can email me as the head of the team.
So at Ferring then, is everyone a scout now, or it sounds like a whole unofficial scouting team?
In pharmaceutical development, we regard everybody as a scout. So I have regular update sessions. The team and Inova put together a nice little video presentation that I can then send out to everybody in the team that says, remember this Inova that we introduced 4 years ago? This is how you access it. Remember how to get in touch. This is your team members, or if somebody's left the organisation. We heard from a previous presenter that there is some churn in the industry. Somebody's left. Oh, it's a chance to say, here's your new team member talking about transdermal deliveries, or your new team member talking about oral peptides, so that it acts as a reminder. So yeah, there's a bit of work involved for the 174. For the dozen that are involved in it, we're in and out all the time. And we've instituted a kind of update every month that the Inova platform sends out that says, dear Janet, you're responsible for the following entries, and these are the updates that have been made. And then these are the ones that haven't been updated. And again, that acts as a little prompt for the 12 people to say, oh, I better just double check where we are with this particular CDA somebody mentioned before, a CDA or an alliance program.
Let's talk a little bit about that process, how the tech scouting team works through a lead or through a potential asset. You explained to me before you've got a 4-step process that you work through.
Yep. So we have the 4 steps. We have scouting, where we take a first look at the technology. As I say, we look at it for GMP, we look at it scientific rationale, we look at it, does it meet our strategy? And that first step, then we set a little score, so we mark it out of 7, and if it's looking better than half, then we move on to our second step, which is the pre-assessment step, and we add in another 5 evaluation areas where we look at competitive technologies, how does it score against what else is out there? Is it the 75th microspherical PLGA system? Look at IP status. I mean, if it's all licensed out and signed up, well, it's not going to be very good. Or if it looks like it's licensable for a particular applications, it would score more highly. We look at the ability to assess. Is this a technology we, as a team, think we understand? Or are we going to have to rely very much on the technology provider to teach us all about that technology? We look at differentiation potential. So if it's something that bit different, that can be a plus, but then the final scoring that we make is a development risk. So sometimes, yes, being interesting and unusual is great, but then that also increases the development risk, and we find those 2 scores sometimes balance each other out. So once we get a score out of 7, so I find that out of 56, once we get up to about 32 or 33, that tends to trigger a tipping into the technology evaluation phase, which is when we start to get into confidentiality agreements. So by now we've probably lost 2/3 of the leads. Maybe half have gone in the first phase, maybe even more than half in the first scouting phase. Another half of that again in the pre-assessment phase. So we're now maybe in the technology evaluation talking 10 a year that we would look at closely. And then the final stage would be to go into feasibility studies, when we would then set up an agreement with the technology provider to investigate the technology in a compound, not a formal product development project, but a compound that's a good model that we understand within the organisation, and it lets us compare technologies one to another by using a suite of standard compounds. And I maybe look at starting 2 or maybe 3 of those in a year. Yeah, 2020, we didn't start anything. Like many people, we were being careful with our cash, not knowing what's happening to sales. So we didn't start anything new in 2020, but you know, I've now got a list for 21 that we're ready to look at closely.
And Inova is tracking all of those stages right the way through from first contact?
Yep, so for the very first time that we put something in, it starts the clock, and then I can monitor how quickly we can move things through. And a previous speaker also mentioned, you know, stuff languishing. I can also see, my goodness, this thing's been sitting here for 7 months. Why have we not moved it along? We can go in and look, actually, you know, we're in the middle of doing something that's taken a long time to negotiate a research services agreement or whatever it might be. Or it might be that we've put something in. I've got things that have been there for 1,000 days. That's 3 years. It's a technology, it's a PhD. They take a long time to work themselves through, and it just sits there, and we keep in touch with the supervisor, and we're monitoring the PhD, and it'll come through, we hope, at one point.
So time is one of the things that you look at. That's one of the reports that you might generate out of Inova. What other reporting are you pulling out of the system?
So I will also group and sort the technologies. So we've put into the database, we've put in fields that will tell us if it's an oral technology, and I will report out what oral technologies, what transdermal technologies I have, what long-acting depots I have, and I can report that out. Or if there's been particular linkages to therapeutic areas, there's another field I can pull out those and see what's happening in there.
And in terms of the number of users there at Fairing, we've got your team, we've got these 174 others with read access, but you told me there's a couple of other teams at Fairing that have picked up Inova as well.
That's correct, Dylan. So, in fact, the technology team were second to the party, and when we were looking at developing our process and looking for a platform, I certainly didn't want it to be an IT project. I was interested in the science. I'm not really interested in the IT of things, and so we were looking around and came across, much like today's session, people who were using an Inova platform. Oh, this is really interesting, and talked a bit more, and then discovered that our BD group within Ferring were already using the platform. So they had already used the platform to do their alliance deals and their tracking things. I think it had gone to sleep a little bit. It wasn't terribly active. So my team, I came along and set up a separate division within the platform. And now also our external innovation team is creating their own, and they're very active. And that was a case of somebody joining Ferring from a previous organisation that had Inova in place, and he was super excited to discover that Ferring also had it, and that's given a new lease of life now. So they're also very active, and what I can do is I can see if I'm in touch with an organisation for a technology, I can see whether one of the other teams has also been in touch with them. I can see who's been in touch with them. We've set it up so that from a confidentiality point of view, I can't drill far down. I can just see the top 1 or 2 levels. And so, like was mentioned previously, legal contracts, heads of agreement, terms of agreement, things like that are not exposed. But I can then get in touch and say, hey, Declan, I can see that you've been speaking to so-and-so, at Purdue or something, and what's happening there, or somebody from MIT's been talking with you. Is it the same people I've been speaking with? No, it's a different sector. Big technology providers, they might not necessarily know each other, but within Ferring, we can see that we're speaking to the same organisation.
And that's one of the things you mentioned to me when we were preparing, is that this idea of having this one memory, this institutional memory, is great for avoiding wasted effort.
That's right. It's wasted effort. It's also, I think somebody mentioned previously, their CEOs, was chatting to somebody at a conference and they was told, well, we're already speaking to you. It's also professionally somewhat embarrassing if you discover that somebody in your organisation is well down a discussion and a negotiation, and then somebody else stumbles into it, and it's very awkward. But it's also useful because you can then say, then it makes the positive part of it is that you've spoken to them, and you can maybe move the conversation on one, and you can say, oh, that's really interesting. I know that you're speaking to my colleague so and so. I've got a slightly different angle on the discussion, and then it all works more smoothly.
And can you recall a time when you actually dove back into that memory, into that repository, and it helped you in reaching out to a technology partner?
Yeah, sometimes we'll look at things, we'll put them to one side, and we say it's not for us just now, and then we'll come back to it. So we will see something maybe in the press, in the scientific literature, and some press release, and we'll say, oh, that's right, and we can then very easily go back in and speak to that person and follow up, pick up the conversation, as it were, and especially this year people have been struggling, keeping things quiet, ticking over, and it's very good to just rekindle those interests and reignite those conversations.
And so I guess for a smaller biotech who might be on the call today, just having that first encounter with Ferring and being told, well, it's not quite right, it's not quite right yet, it doesn't always mean it's the end of the road.
Absolutely not. Every contact is preserved within the system in perpetuity. Also the names, even if the person's left the organisation, so the driver for that conversation may have left Ferring, but the information is still there, so we could stay, well, I know that you spoke with Janet. She's no longer with the organisation, but I'm picking it up, and again, it makes the relationship work more easily. As has been said before, a lot of it is about relationship management, and keeping things efficient.
That's fantastic. Janet, thanks for that. We're going to actually bring back our other couple of speakers there. So if we can turn on our webcams, we're going to jump into some Q&A because there's a few questions that have come through. Let me just see if you do have questions and you haven't already added them to the chat box there, you should feel free to add them now, and I'll try and get through them if we still have the time. The first one though, and Gilles, we've already gone through a couple of questions with you, but the first one popped up when Matthias was speaking, but it actually came up again with Florian. When you were talking about efficiency, Matthias, the question is, how do you actually measure that in a quantitative way?
It's really hard. I think this is where it becomes a little bit intangible. So I assume you can, if you track, like Janet also mentioned, your timelines and the time from coming in to review to either decline or to going somewhere. If you track those and carefully look at data, I would assume you will see an impact on your timelines there. But I think it's often more so the subtlety, so the lack of friction, which makes things work better and easier, and they're difficult to measure. I just have to say that.
We had a question that came up for Janet when you were speaking. These read-only users, is that something that you would recommend? I guess when everybody's a scout, it's almost essential.
I would say it's a useful thing to have. At the moment, in the last year, I haven't had so many spontaneous new contacts from scouts, but I suspect that's because we're not going to in-person conferences. People are not wandering down a poster display looking for one poster, and then they see something that's not even their particular area and they say, oh, but that might be interesting to Ferring. We're not getting those random hits that I would have had previously. But when we do get them, it works. Yes, we get new things that we haven't come across before, which is really good. And it also is good for the organisation if we have already seen that technology and we're already speaking with them. It also makes people think, well, yeah, we're doing the right thing, we're in the right space. And then it encourages them the next time to come up with an idea or a proposal that we haven't come across. So I would say the last year, not so valuable, but previous to that, it was very valuable.
Gilles, if I can sorry, go ahead.
I can add on that. We also have plenty of read-only licenses, and for us we send also out this monthly report I mentioned before. Is one aspect of it is the reporting to our management, but it's also in a different way. It's also to send out to our R&D groups, at least to the heads of our R&D groups, what we have seen, because we don't know every single need within their lab activities. We don't have all the time every problem they're working on. So sometimes we have seen that we send out, hey, we have seen this 10 new organizations, they work on these topics, and then R&D reaches out to us and says, hey, this sounds interesting, can you connect us? And so in this way, these read-only licenses are fairly valuable for us.
And I think you're right, but I'll pivot to Gilles as well and just say this isn't feedback that we've only got from Merck and Ferring. Everybody is a scout is something we've heard right through the biopharma industry over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think especially when we see a lot of our customers moving into scouting for more and more early stage assets, and we have a lot of emerging challenging technology, to name a few, gene therapy and others, that increases the complexity. And I think that's when you need to involve scientists more and more into your sourcing, because they see things, they read articles, and if you can leverage that intelligence, you increase your efficiency.
Okay. To come to Florian, Florian, you talked about that you had your venture fund, which was looking at some of those things. Was that via the reports that you're sending out?
No, that was actually we invite our venture fund or materials venture fund to all of our team meetings, our quarterly team meetings, and so that we can share what we've done. And this way they realize that the database is of value, and then they started using it regularly afterwards. So it wasn't necessary from this reports, but from sharing what we do and how we track our information, and then they come back on a regular basis, not necessarily based on the monthly report.
Okay, Matthias, and I think Janet just mentioned before, in 2020 has been one of those years where virtual events have started to come through and replace all of the in-person events. The question was how your team in partnering has adapted to virtual events.
Well, I mean, like everyone else, we had to. It's more fun to go to the real meetings, and I think I missed the serendipity of running into someone and you find something out really, really exciting that wasn't really planned. So, but again, if it's not an option, I think on a technical level and on an information gathering level, these virtual events work really well, because basically, since they're running a system already, you basically have all the information there, and you don't even have to enter too much anymore, other than sort of possibly your own notes. So I think in terms of the technical aspect and the getting it into Inova is very easy. So either it's already hosted by Inova and then you've got it, or it's one of the other ones where you can just do an export and an import, and it works very well.
And Janet, I saw you nodding there. This is a similar experience at Ferrum?
Yes, that's right. I think going forward, we're probably going to have a mix of these in-person events and these virtual events, because certainly capturing the information in the Inova system, you as I said, we have some standard forms. It's very easy then in your speed dating one-to-one appointment, then you can very quickly say, do you know what, I think this is really interesting. Send me the information. We'll set up a discussion offline, and it's straight away into the Inova platform. Or you can say, 10-15 minutes into your, you've talked about everything you want to talk to that person. You say, look, it's lovely meeting you, but I don't think there's anything in it for us. But it's much easier to log both types of relationships in the system, that you've spoken to somebody, there's nothing there, or you've spoken to somebody and you're going to move it forward. So yeah, it's having this kind of platform this year, it's been very advantageous.
And Florian, it's similar for you as well. You've shifted already from just a remote team into virtual events as well.
Yeah, for us, I'm based here at our headquarters in Darmstadt, and although our R&D teams are in a separate building, you bump into each other on the way to the canteen, or we have an innovation center where people meet, and this is missing. But we have a bit of experience with this already, because my other colleagues were abroad and not on an R&D side, and so that's why the transition is not so challenging. But yeah, I do agree a lot that that bumping into each other on the side has much value, and that's actually what I had to do, or what I like to do is that I shared every Friday with my colleagues in the US. When I started my weekend and they started their Friday, I had a few sessions with them to share what's going on here on site. And but yeah, it's a bit different right now.
And Gilles, I guess if I drag it back to the Inova Enterprise platform, whether it's a virtual event or an in-person event, all of that information can be shifted directly to Inova for people with a contract.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'd just love to add one thing about virtual partnering event, and I do agree with Matthias' point that you will always meet the serendipity, and we actually pulling our brains and trying to find some way to recreate digitally some sort of serendipity. But I think this is a vain goal, and that would not be 100% achievable for sure. But interestingly enough, when we look at the numbers of meeting per attendee achieved at either BioDigital, being the digital version of the Bio International Convention, or the events we've been running, we're pretty close to the same statistics as the one you achieve in an in-person event. And so I think that's a sign that the industry has adopted virtual event or virtual partnering event actually pretty rapidly. Of course, it does not take into account the meeting you would have in a corridor or at a coffee machine, but still, I think that's pretty impressive how it was adopted. And our view on this is that, of course, in-person meeting will come back, but there will still be some space for some virtual meetings, and probably to name Bill Gates' forecast on how travel should reduce in the future. I think I would agree with him that about half of the professional travel trips will disappear completely and be replaced by a more virtual form, and another 50% going back to in-person meetings.
I have a question here, and it doesn't say who it's directed to, but I think having talked to everybody this morning, everybody mentioned a corporate memory or an institutional memory or some sort of repository there. And that seemed to be a theme. So the question was, how quickly has Inova replaced existing corporate memory systems? Is someone able to jump in on that one?
Well, I mean, we didn't have one before, so before there was no corporate memory. It sat in heads of people, and if we were lucky enough and had some long-standing members of the partner, then that's where it was. You would go to that person to say, "Oh, do you remember that was in 2008?" And blah. So, and I think with having Inova, that was basically replaced. So, I mean, obviously, you could still go to the same people, but now you didn't have to. Or if those people left, you didn't have to, oh my God, so we have to save all their emails because we don't know what they knew, right? So I think that's the advantage of having it in a system rather than in a person's head.
And I think, Janet, you mentioned turnover as well, of the advantage of keeping the information even if the person leaves the company.
Yeah, that's very true. And so if and the person, had a database, they had their own Excel thing, and they gave it, they sort of handed it over to somebody else, but it was very difficult then to follow up on where they got to in various discussions. So yeah, we've been using the Inova platform for 4 years. Before that, it was just somebody's Excel spreadsheet, somebody's SharePoint site, and even, I mean, now people are saying, well, we're going to move away from SharePoint to Teams, and everything that was on a SharePoint site is now going to be on a Teams site. Well, that's another whole set of records lost along the way. So that has been important as we've gone along, and helpful, because I was quite pleased to hear one of the other speakers saying, that we went back, 2017, we went back. Sometimes it takes a long time for new technologies to mature. We've heard a lot about the vaccine development, how fantastically fast that was, but people have been working on the common cold, coronaviruses, for decades. So there was a platform there, it just needed something to come on. And we find our technology platforms are the same. They take a while to mature, and we have to be able to go back and sort of build on that prior knowledge. And just because it doesn't work for one application doesn't mean to say it's a total failure. We might go back and look at it and say, well, we tried it out, wasn't so great, but there were some advantages. We can park it over there and come back when we think we could pick up on those advantages.
Okay. A question that's just come in for Matthias. If I was a biotech trying to partner with UCB, how can I put my best foot forward?
You can just send me an email, and that's probably a good way forward. We've got also a BD portal, where you can just type in your idea, your request. We are all on LinkedIn. It's another good way how people can find us, or at the partnering meeting. So I think there are quite a few channels where you can get hold of us, and any one of those is as good as the other. It's down to your preference.
And Janet, it's as much as you're out there looking for people in scouting, you do rely on people coming to you as well.
Yeah, so people will contact Fering. We, like Matthias, we have a work with us portal, so people will put in their ideas, and there's a drop down menu that's linked all through the Inova system, where depending on what field, if somebody chooses a drug delivery technology, it comes straight into my email inbox. Somebody puts in a product license, it will go to the business development person. If somebody puts in some biological receptor work, it'll go straight to the external innovation persons. So it's already been filtered that way. But yeah, LinkedIn, people get in touch with us, people get in touch with the consequence of these types of events, virtual events, in-person events. The access point doesn't really matter. It's the content thereafter. And one of the things we find with technologies is just because this is a fabulous technology, scientifically valuable, it's the, and so why should I want it? What's so special? Yeah, it's a great technology, but why should Fering pick it up? So the point at which the conversation starts is very quickly becomes irrelevant. Once the conversation is started, it's all about content and how well the technology has been described, what benefits it could win for the organization that's partnering.
And Florian, I see you nodding there as well. Being reached out to on LinkedIn is not new for you either, I guess.
No, it's not. It's but also to follow up on Janet, it's also then why is it that we should follow up on it, on this technology? It might be the best technology, but if we don't have the proper knowledge about to drive it further, then maybe someone else is the better partner for this technologies or for this idea.
And Gilles, these internal and external portals, these are standard now. This is standard operating procedure for biopharma, right?
I don't have the figure on top of my mind, but I think out of the 60% of top 50 pharma that use Inova today, I would say roughly half have portals rolled out today. I don't want to be mistaken, but I think that's probably the order of scale that I have in mind.
Okay. We've got time probably for just one last question for everyone else, and I held this over even though it came in rather early. And the question quite simply is, what are you looking forward to at your company in 2021? Maybe Matthias, I can start with you.
You think about sort of contents or general partnering, or?
I think they're just looking forward. Maybe they've had quite enough of 2020, and they're looking for,
okay.
for some
Good. Okay. Yes.
light on the horizon.
So I guess what we're, like everyone, is looking for a little bit of piece of normality, right, coming back. So even though I agree with Gilles that basically business travel probably will diminish because you've seen that certain things work really well over the computer, having this essential bit of travel and visiting and meeting people where it helps finding new approaches, new technologies. I hope that's going to come back, because that will be very nice, and it's something I'm missing, particularly if you're constantly living, say, in the external space. Other than that, as I said, I think it was a forced but a great learning curve to adapt these technologies. Everybody had to up their game, and most people did, right? Everybody learned how to do the Zoom and all the related technologies. So I think the combination of both, I think, could be a very powerful place to be in, right? With you start your limited travel again, but you also you can do all the virtual bits, and I think I hope it makes partnering a better place.
Florian, what about on your end?
For me, to be honest, having a lot of calls with my colleagues also from home, I got to know some more personal information about my colleagues, and it was actually interesting to get to know them a bit better, and which helps also to work together better. And this is what I take out of this year. But yeah, obviously for next year, my office is 50 minutes walking away from my flat. Although it's just so close, I'm not going to go there because it's empty. So meeting other people, it's not just for lunch, is something I'm looking forward to. And on a personal basis, also, I love to see different and new places, and going somewhere else again would be great. And also seeing family more often. But on a business point, for us in our performance materials business, we have a bit mixed view on the situation right now. We have businesses like our display materials, where some developments have been speed up through coronavirus, and so that there's a change to new technology. And then we have also materials for coatings, but also for cosmetics, which has been hit through the automotive industry. And cosmetics, since people don't go to work every day anymore, it's not so needed anymore. But then we have also our semiconductor business, and through all these digital tools we now use and additional devices, this has looked very good. So on this, so partly we hope that this digitalization continues, and on the other side, some stuff come back, and so it's a bit mixed view for from this year, and then also looking into the future.
Janet, what are you looking forward to in 2021?
I'm looking forward to research picking up again in non-coronavirus areas, because so many people have focused their efforts in those areas, including my organization, sending out research grants for coronavirus and pregnancy. Even those sorts of areas have used up everybody's time, resources, and I'm looking forward to other areas of research opening up, new technologies having space to develop, research labs to be opened for other activities, and moving those projects on, because quite a lot of projects have been put onto treading water. The labs, non-essential places have been closed. Even some pharmaceutical research labs have been downscaled just to keep things ticking over. So I'm looking forward to 21, a resurgence of those efforts.
And Gilles, I'll give you the last word there, but I guess you've already laid out a big part of your vision for 2021.
Oh, well, I mean, on a personal matter, I hope to be able to visit my Japanese colleagues and Japanese clients at some point next year. That'd be nice. It's been quite some time since we were able to travel a bit, but I would finish in very much line with what Janet just said. I think just before this pandemic, the pharma industry was really at an inflection point from a science standpoint, and we see a rising number of platform deals, and there's tremendous breakthroughs that are ahead of us. So I'm really excited. Like if you take, as we mentioned earlier, gene therapy, adenovirus or retroviruses, vectors can be applied in so many indications that it is in a way a challenge for the organization. So we're excited to see partnering moving from a BD only activity to a larger activity involving more scientists across the organization, because that's needed, and that's exciting, because I think this industry has a lot of publicity right now because everyone is focused on the vaccines, but Janet is right. There's so much more coming up, and we should be excited about what the industry has to deliver.
So on that, you can see that we're coming up on time. So I wanted just to take an opportunity to thank again all of our guests from this afternoon. So to Matthias of UCB, to Florian from Merck, Janet from Ferring, and of course Gilles from Inova, and perhaps the biggest thank you there to everyone who was able to find the time today to attend all of our Japanese users. It's fantastic to see so many of you here. A final couple of notes. Please keep an eye on your email inbox in the next couple of days. You'll receive a link to review the video of the event. And as I mentioned at the start, if you want to share that link around with your colleagues who are unable to join us today, you should feel free to do that. As well, please don't forget to complete the survey that just pops up when you exit the event. It's just a few seconds, but your feedback is very valuable. And of course, if you'd like to participate with Inova in the future as a panelist, you can let us know that as well. And with that, we're done. So thank you all. Please stay safe, well, enjoy these last few weeks of 2020, and we look forward to an even better 2021. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.